Jimmy was a cop, and his partner and best friend Joe had recently gone into a coma after an operation. Jimmy would take his partner's daughter Alice to kindergarten daily. One day on the way to kindergarten, a crying Alice's tears would spark an epiphany for both Jimmy and the little girl. Jimmy was a dedicated, kind-hearted police officer who adored children. Unfortunately, Jimmy was currently going through his fair share of rough times. He and his wife were currently undergoing a separation, which was difficult for Jimmy because it meant he didn't get to see his son. His wife had decided to separate from Jimmy because he'd refused to take his health seriously despite being overweight and spend more time with friends than family. Jimmy's partner Joe had recently fallen into a coma after having a big operation. Jimmy and Joe had served together in the force for almost 10 years and were more than just partners, they were best friends. So Jimmy had agreed to take Joe's daughter Alice to and from kindergarten daily until Joe was better. Jimmy cherished the time he got to spend with Alice. She reminded him a lot of his son. One day, Jimmy was on his way to drop Alice off at kindergarten. Alice was often a very jolly and outspoken child. Also, she adored Jimmy's company. He had a way with children. However, for some reason, Alice was not her usual cheerful self. "Alice, is everything okay, sweetheart?" Jimmy asked. Alice said nothing, just shaking her head in disagreement. "Want to tell Uncle Jimmy what's wrong?" It's Father's Day at school today and I have to speak about my dad," Alice said softly, starting to cry. "Oh no, sweetheart, does that make you sad?" Jimmy said carefully, holding her little shoulder, trying to console her. "A little," Alice said, wiping her tears. "Don't be sad, my angel. While your dad can't be here today, your second father is here and will be here until he can," Jimmy said. "Second father?" Alice asked with a hopeful smile. "Yep, you got your dad and me. What a special girl you are, eh?" Jimmy emphasized, glad to see Alice smiling again. "I am, second father. I like the sound of that," Alice concluded, back to her joyful self. That day, Jimmy stayed over to watch the Father's Day concert Alice and her classmates were having. Jimmy was incredibly moved when Alice got on stage to sing a song she dedicated to her sick father as well as her second father. Jimmy watched Alice's performance with tears in his eyes. At that moment, he remembered his son and realized how much he missed his family. As she finished her song, she provided concluding words for Jimmy. "Thank you for being my second father, Uncle Jimmy. You're amazing," she concluded before the crowd erupted into applause. After the celebration, Jimmy dropped Alice home and the first thing he did was go to the gym. From that day onwards, he was at the gym every day. Alice's words moved him to take charge of his own life and regain the family he'd lost. Alice made him realize the joys he was losing out on without his family in his life. After a few months, Jimmy was in the best shape he'd ever been. His wife saw Jimmy's efforts to manage his health and he was eventually able to persuade her to allow them to be a family again. Alice's father Joe soon miraculously came out of the coma. Alice and the rest of Joe's family were completely overjoyed to have him back with them. Jimmy was in complete disbelief at the turn of events. His best friend and partner had recovered simultaneously as his family was restored. Joe's wife also explained the lengths his partner had gone to ensure she and Alice were okay. The revelation brought him to tears. Joe decided one of the first things he wanted to do now he was out of his coma was have dinner with his and Jimmy's family to give thanks for their various breakthroughs. But he didn't want it to be just any dinner, but something special for his dear friend and partner. So Jimmy planned a surprise party. Joe's wife convinced Jimmy and his family that Joe had business to handle and wouldn't be joining them. Jimmy was perplexed and sad to hear his friend wouldn't be joining. He had waited for so long for them to celebrate with their families like they used to. Just then, as Jimmy's heart was beginning to sink within him, Joe walked in. Everyone was completely overjoyed. Joe had bought him all exquisite gifts. He saved the best for last, giving his partner an expensive watch and thanking him for all he'd done for their family. Later, Joe's wife explained to Jimmy that Joe had in fact sold his car in order to get them the gifts. Upon hearing this, Jimmy was greatly troubled and thought he ought to question his friend, but when he asked Joe, his friend simply replied, "I'd give more for a friend like you, Jimmy." Moved by his gesture, they spoke nothing more of it and enjoyed their dinner together as a family, reunited again in joy, gratitude, and celebration.
If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.